So before we get started on this little conversation, I want to just make it known that this is going to be a spoiler-heavy discussion of Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, I would encourage you to go out and see it, or if you're one of the unfortunate fuckbags in the UK who can't see it because it hasn't released in your home country yet, a week's wait won't kill you. But until you've seen the movie, I would suggest clicking right off the video right now. On with the show. Okay. Dude, that new Resident Evil movie, it was everything, it was almost everything I wanted it to be. There was a lot to process in such a short amount of time, but as much information as there was, I think Johannes Roberts handled it really well, and I don't know about you, but I'm ready to see that sequel, and I'm hoping there is a sequel.
Trust me, I agree. Hopefully the number of people bitching about it isn't enough for them to not do a sequel, because goddamn, there's so fucking many.
I really don't care for the Resident Evil community. I mean, why do you think I just spit roasted them alive in my video last night?
Uh-huh. And I already told you about my comment on Scorpion's video review.
Yep.
Ooh. But he was a bitch and deleted my comment.
See, that's another good reason to come to my channel, because even if your comments are negative, I'm not deleting them. I'm only deleting spam that leads links to sketchy porno sites. Because I care about you guys. I will admit I was initially very curious about how Roberts was going to blend the events of the first two games together, and I was actually was going to do a top 5 predictions video, but I ultimately decided not to. Let's see, the certain predictions I was making, I was guessing that Chief Irons was going to be killed by the dog. That turned out not to be the case, because Claire had to go and be a badass. Although his ultimate death did lead to one of the more gnarly parts of the entire movie, the fucking liquor scene. I've never seen a liquor die from getting its jaw ripped open.
Holy, yeah. I saw that and I was like, holy shit. I was like, they were really going all out for this fucking movie.
Like I do wish there was more like Day of the Dead levels of gore. George Romero's Day of the Dead, I should say.
Not the lousy 2008 remake.
What,
the vegetarian zombie?
Yeah. It's like, he's a zombie, but he's not going to eat anybody because he was a vegetarian when he was human. It's like,
that's not how it works.
Y'all can suck my ass through a coffee stirrer with that bullshit.
Yeah, didn't you mention at one point in time that the gore levels in the first few Resident Evil movies were, like, almost PG-13 levels?
They were that level of fucking tame. Like, even the rare occasions when Anderson's movies would when the gore would sort of ramp up, it was barely even R-worthy. It was a very soft R that you could easily just cut around and you would have a PG-13. I mean, there was CG blood in the latter half of the series. You wipe that CG blood out and you almost got a fucking PG-13 rating.
Pretty much. So, at least in this one, the woman's mostly blind.
Yeah. I mean, there was a reason Lisa was doing that whole thing. I was guessing Irons was going to get killed by the dog. That didn't end up happening. I was guessing that Wesker was going to be the one to shoot Birkin in place of Umbrella's commandos, which that definitely wound up being the case. Because I figured Nest was going to wind up being under the Spencer Mansion, which, fuck you, I was right.
I was surprised to see Lisa Trevor in more of a less antagonistic role.
Yeah, I feel like that was another thing I didn't bring up in the review, but I feel like they could have used her a lot more. I feel like she was really, really underused in this movie.
And the fact that Claire almost became one of William's test subjects.
At least that gave sort of a solid reason for why she would have run away from Raccoon City and just kind of Linda Hamilton to herself.
I wanted to come back to expose Umbrella.
I was guessing that Barkin was going to end up shooting Wesker, which would lead to him reanimating and becoming the Wesker that we know from the games. I mean, Barkin shot him, but the kill shot went to Jill, which I thought was cool, considering they were kind of making... I'll be honest, a lot of fans were throwing a shit fit over it, but I didn't mind the Jill and Wesker being a thing. Because it definitely feels more like she's more into him than he is into her.
Yeah, probably makes sense more in a relationship with Chris, probably.
Well, I mean, let's not pretend RE fans haven't been shipping Jill and Chris for years.
Uh-huh. As someone who used to read Resident Evil fan fiction, trust me, I know.
Yeah.
But that was like in my preteen years. I haven't read fan fiction probably like over 12 years.
I tend to shy away from fan fiction because it always feels like it was written by preteens.
Uh-huh.
I was guessing that Lisa and Claire would have wound up being childhood friends, but in my brain, I was processing it more like they were going to change Lisa to being one of the kids in the orphanage and then gets taken off to become an experiment, and maybe Claire might witness something involving that. I wasn't guessing that Lisa was just going to be this deformed girl that hangs around the orphanage at night. Although I don't mind the way they kind of set up her and Claire's relationship. I just feel like it could have been handled a little differently.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting them to be that estranged.
Yeah. And I was predicting that Raccoon City would be destroyed by the end of the movie because how else would Umbrella have to contain the infection? Which
apparently they had the city built to explode in the case of an outbreak.
I will say that at least the entire city turning into a giant sinkhole is a lot easier to cover up than a government-launched thermobaric bomb.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's kind of like... honestly, something like that happening kind of makes me think of what happened to the nuclear power plant in Gareth Edwards' Godzilla movie. Like, it just fell apart out of nowhere. Like, it's easy. Could have said, like, it was a meltdown, like a nuclear explosion from underneath could have caused the city to go down.
Yeah. That opening scene, which is one of the only parts of that movie that fucking works, in my opinion.
Yeah, they killed Bryan Cranston not too fucking early.
Was bullshit! And I that wouldn't have been so bad if his son hadn't been such a standard McDefault.
How'd you describe that movie? A 2-hour cock tease?
That is exactly what Godzilla 2014 is. It's a 2-hour cock tease.
Okay, let's get back to Ari.
Yeah. I'm just gonna say this point blank.
I did not have sexual relations with
Chris! I remember when the cast was announced, and you were losing your shit when Avanjogia was announced as part of the cast for Leon.
Well, yeah, I grew up watching shows he was in. And I remember, actually remember thinking as a kid, the funny thing is, I remember thinking as a kid, like, I think Avanjogia from Victoria should play Carlos. Well, I was part right.
Well, considering the entire RE community has been the one thing they've constantly been pissing and whining about is the fact that he looks more like Carlos than Leon.
At least he actually acts like Leon, unlike Joan Herb.
The people who are griping about him being portrayed as incompetent, it's like, you do realize that the only reason Leon was able to muscle through the Raccoon City outbreak in the games is because we fucking did that, right? Leon didn't do that. We did that. as the player did that.
So many times in both the original and remake.
And
I whip up without breaking a sweat.
And there was very little in the way of characterizations in the games. I said this in my review. What little characterization in the games might be able to pass for a video game, because Resident Evil's always been gameplay-centric, but you're doing a movie, and Johannes Roberts specifically wanted to make characters with dimensions. In this case, Leon being the first guy, the new guy, and it's his first day on the job. Like, the dude is not gonna be a fucking Leon the professional on day one.
Mm-mm.
I would think that would be blindingly butt fucking obvious, but
yeah, they established in Resident Evil 2 that he was just a rookie cop who had the worst first day of work in existence.
Yeah, he's not going to be a badass. Which is why I love that. One of my favorite lines in the movie is when Claire tells him, "Get your shit together, or you're not going to make it through the night."
Uh-huh.
I mean, let's be real here. Claire was always the protagonist of RE2, and Leon was always just a side character.
Agreed. Finally, someone else said it. As it goes, Claire A, Leon B.
Yeah, canonically, that's how it goes. With Avanjogia, I was kind of in between. I was in a... It's like when they cast a new Batman, or they cast a new James Bond. You're kind of in this mindset of, I have to see him in character before I can make any kind of judgment. And that's kind of where I was, because I didn't know who Avanjogia was until he was announced as part of the cast, and my ideal Leon was Tom Holland.
Yeah, if I was the director, Tom Holland would have been getting cast, as well as, my dream Resident Evil cast. My dream Resident Evil cast would be, three of the members of the cast would be from Hawaii Five-0. Alex O'Loughlin as Chris Redfield, Scott Kane as Albert Wesker, Grace Park as Jill Valentine, David Harbour as Barry Burton, Tom Holland as Leon Kennedy, and Miranda Cosgrove as Claire Redfield.
David Harbour as Barry would be totally boss.
Agreed.
If they do a sequel, because I know Roberts has said that there was a version of this movie that had Barry in it, and he felt there were too many characters as it was, but he does intend to put Barry in a future movie. Hopefully with more dignity than Kevin Durant's non-portrayal. Personally, I would like to see Jeffrey Dean Morgan play Barry, but that's just me.
I think he'd be a good Barry, too.
David Harbour or Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Didn't the Retribution incarnation of Barry die like a bitch, though?
Pretty much. I mean, he got to go out guns blazing, but he still went out in a fairly... his death was beyond bullshit. Just like that whole fucking movie was.
All 6 of those movies were bullshit. What do you mean?
That one almost is like Apocalypse and Final Chapter are the bottom 2 for me, but that one would almost take Apocalypse's place, almost, just because it has better edited action scenes. Yeah, I'm still trying to process how, if Claire couldn't rock her Richard Simmons shorts in the desert in Extinction, how the fuck does it make sense for Ada to be rocking her RE4 red dress with the slit going up the side in Siberia in winter when it's 50 butt fucking below?
You said that in your Retribution review, and I still laugh my ass off every time I hear that.
Yeah, for those who can't be bothered to watch our respective reviews of the Paul W.S. Anderson Resident Evil films, first off, you lazy cunt, and second, allow me to summarize. Paul W.S. Anderson is to Resident Evil what Alec Baldwin is to gun safety.
Hey, I gotta put this, while we're on that topic, I gotta put this out there, right? It says, I stand behind Alec Baldwin, because I sure as hell ain't stand in front of him.
I was really, when I found out that they were going to try to put some personality behind Wesker so that he's not just this off-brand Agent Smith, I wasn't expecting them to really make him, because we've always known Wesker as Joe Cool, the guy behind the shades who has very little, if any, emotion to him. And I saw somebody describe this take on Tom Hopper's version as Wesker if he never grew out of college. And I'm just thinking, have you never... I'm just thinking, look, dude, the only guy he's fucking with, really, is Leon in, one scene. Because Leon's the new guy, and the new guy has to be fucked with. It's like one of the unwritten rules.
Being a cop, yeah.
Oh, that's in general. We brought up, you brought up your Dreamcast of Resident Evil. I compiled my own list of this, and it's kind of, it would have to be if this movie had been made in the 90s. And and it took me a while to really think of who I thought could fit the characters, not just who looks good in game-accurate outfits, because Johannes Roberts has a point when he says that he wanted to cast based on acting ability and not just who looked good in cosplay.
Uh-huh.
Which is why we have... not all the characters look game accurate, but at least they feel like the characters they're supposed to be portraying. So my version of this movie's cast, if it had been made in 98, 99, starting with Neve Campbell as Claire Redfield. I only just recently started watching the Scream series. I love Neve Campbell as Sidney Prescott. She would make it a great Claire.
Back then, yeah. She from certain angles she looks like Code Veronica Claire.
She does. Then I thought Ben Affleck would make a great Chris Redfield. If you look at Ben Affleck back then, he had Chris's rugged good looks. He had his swagger, and let's be real, Affleck was the bomb in Phantoms.
Uh-huh. He's also probably the most comic accurate Batman we've gotten.
Fuck yes. One of these days I'm going to have to do a defense of that movie. Yeah, I picked Edward Furlong for Leon because he had that Leon look back then. Maybe not so much now because drugs and alcohol are a bitch. But he had that Leon look. He had the Leon hair, so fans wouldn't be pissing and whining about him not looking like Leon back then. And in 98, he actually was 21.
Yeah, so I already told you who I thought would have been a good Leon back then.
Yep.
John C.W. Johnson, Carter, the Red Ranger from Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue. He did kind of look like Resident Evil 2 Leon back then.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if he was cast in the as Leon in the George A. Romero live-action commercial. Will look more accurate.
Probably.
Because you saw the guy they cast as Leon in that trailer. The way his hair was, just meh.
Yeah, he didn't have that. He didn't have that Nick Carter curtain job going on in the old RE2 ad.
But honestly, my statement kind of feels hypocritical because, well, new Leon in the new movie doesn't look like Leon at all, but still acts like him, and I still love him.
Yeah.
So I think that was a hypocritical statement, what I just did.
The internet's an echo chamber of hypocrisy, bro. It's all right. I think I picked Angelina Jolie for Jill because back then she was still 98, 99 was 3 years before Tomb Raider. She was a rising talent back then, and Tomb Raider's the movie that kind of took her to the fucking moon. But back then, she was the biggest thing she had been in was probably Hackers, which I haven't seen yet, but she was a small enough name and a rising talent back then that she could have brought. I think she could have brought something to Jill. And I'm just gonna say this: people are upset about Jill being a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs in this movie, but let's be real with ourselves. Assuming this movie uses the same backstory on Jill as the games do, she was a Green Beret prior to joining STARS. And Green Berets are a little crazy.
My only problem with Jill in the movie, and this is something you mentioned in your trailer reaction, was that she didn't have her beret hat.
Yeah.
That was my only problem. But other than that, I freaking loved this. I freaking loved her as Jill.
Yeah, and my only other issue is that she didn't do any lockpicking.
That too.
It's like, what the fuck, Roberts? You've got the master of unlocking here, and you do nothing with that.
Oh well, still a good movie.
Maybe in the next one. I mean, I guess they figured, well, we got Claire picking the lock on Chris's back door. That'll do.
I just thought of someone who probably could have played a good Brad.
Oh yeah.
If there was a movie, Matthew Lillard.
Dude.
Matthew Lillard is Brad Bickers.
You know what? Back then, he had that whiny ass voice. He could have gone with it.
I was talking about being a scaredy cat.
Oh, that too. That too. Even though poor old Chicken Heart didn't last very long in this movie. I will say he had a more dignified dignified death in this movie than he does in either version of RE3.
Yeah, well, I just wish that his death in the RE3 remake was, well, at least somewhat similar to how he died in the original. I mean, in the original, he took a hentai tentacle to the face, and sorry, I can't say that with a straight face.
No, it's fine.
But but in the remake, he was evident. Either he got swarmed by zombies at some point after departing from Jill, or he died from the bite and reanimated.
I would say it was just from him being overwhelmed and swarmed. I like the way he went out in the remake because he got to go out. He didn't get to have to go out screaming like a bitch. He actually went out like a hero, trying to buying Jill some time to escape.
But then later we see him at the police station where
Poor Marvin.
Okay. In the Resident Evil 2 remake, when Marvin stressed to Leon, and don't make my mistake, if you see one of those things, uniform or not, you do not hesitate. We see in the Resident Evil 3 remake why he stressed that to Leon.
Yeah, because he done fucked up.
Because the zombie said sorry, like Brad kept a little bit of his humanity somehow.
Sorry. Dude,
that's how he got the stomach wound.
Marvin was nowhere in this movie, and
I just realized that shit.
I mean, I'm not losing sleep over it, but you know, it's kind of a bummer that he's not there.
Who would you have casted? Like in a modern day movie, who would you cast as Marvin?
Idris Elba.
I was literally thinking that. I was thinking him or Will Smith.
Will Smith has too big of an ego. It would have to be somebody like Idris Elba or maybe Anthony Mackie.
Anthony Mackie, isn't that War Machine?
Anthony Mackie's Falcon. Don Cheadle's War Machine.
Well, I feel dumb now.
That's all right, man.
It's just I I get all, like, not just them, but I get almost every cast member mixed up on Avengers sometimes.
Well,
Like, I mix up Chris Evans and Chris Hemsworth all the time.
well, considering how many movies there are and how gallingly similar they all feel, I don't blame you for that. Which is one of the
Yeah.
reasons I rarely ever talk about them on the channel, assuming I even have, because most of them are just they just kind of blend together for me. I know the galling irony of saying that with Avengers Endgame with an Avengers Endgame poster and a Guardians of the Galaxy print on my wall, but that is the hard truth. Most of them those are two of the few standouts of the MCU for me. For Wesker, I would probably like the one I'm always leaning so hard towards is Kiefer Sutherland.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you watch him in Flatliners, or you watch him in those early seasons of 24, he had that Wesker take charge, no bullshit attitude. And he could have, and even for Tom Hopper's lighter portrayal of him early on in this movie, he still has he has enough charm that he could have made that work.
Oh, yeah.
John Deal, who most people don't know about, uh, I know him mainly from two TV shows. One of them being Miami Vice, and the other being The Shield. Uh, he was my pick for Chief Irons just because he plays the assistant chief of the LAPD on The Shield. A total corrupt shitbag. Probably wouldn't be as goofy and over the top as Donald Logue's portrayal, which I still say is the best character of the whole movie. He must have a thing for Journey, because that bit where he's giving Wesker shit over answering his pager, and he's like, "You got a hot date tonight?" Which that scene I love, but it was a bit too winky for anybody who grew up in the '90s and remembers the shit he's naming off. Yeah, you gonna take her to Planet Hollywood? Maybe rent something from Blockbuster, put on some Journey, and then you cut to him trying to GTFO out of Raccoon City, and he hits the roadblock where I guess it's Hunk and his team and his cleanup crew, and fucking Journey's playing on Irons' car stereo.
I remember that.
So he must have a thing for Journey.
I was thinking that was he definitely has a thing for Journey. But I was thinking that those guys in protective suits at the roadblock, I wasn't really so much so as thinking that as Hunk's team. I was thinking that as just like the Umbrella Security Service.
Right. Well, they're not quite UBCS.
I understand that Hunk was pretty much a part of that team, but I just couldn't see one of those guys as Hunk, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if Hunk was going to come in, he would have came in like a post-credit scene or something.
And that mid-credit scene.
Yeah.
I mean, first off, I love that it literally opens with Wesker and the body bag sitting up like it's that pre-menu intro from the RE1 remake.
Yeah, before that gets shot and falls back down.
Yeah, well, Wesker's too valuable to shoot down, I guess, to Homegirl's organization. That one thing that I also was not big on was Ada Wong. I love that Ada's in the movie, because I like Ada's character, but I was not happy about her being strictly relegated to a sequel bait mid-credit scene.
And well, you see, before the movie came out, if you look at the cast on Google, the actress who played her and the character was there.
Yeah.
And the entire time I was watching the movie, and then they all get down to that facility, and it's like, where the fuck's Ada?
I was just sitting there thinking, okay, well, she'll show up when she needs to show up, or I had heard that there was a mid-credit scene, so I thought, okay, well, if she's not in the primary movie, if she doesn't show up at any point before the credits start rolling, she'll probably be there, and I guess I was right on that. I wasn't happy about it, but I'm interested.
I told you about it because I didn't want you to miss it.
Yeah.
I wasn't. We'd already heard about it, so you know.
Yeah, I think I had heard about it before you had told me about it, because somebody else that I watch on YouTube had brought it up. Brad Jones, who so far is the only other person I've seen give this movie an even remotely positive review besides myself. Everybody else is just pissing and whining about how it's different from the games, and one person who I refuse to name off because that would require me to have any smidgen of respect for him for saying something so gallingly fucking stupid. Actually said that only fans of the game would get anything out of this.
Oh yeah.
Which is dangerously limiting. Number one, Brad Jones, who I brought up a minute ago, openly stated that he has only ever played the original RE2 back when it first came out. So he's not a fan of the Resident Evil games. He does, by his own admission, like the Paul W.S. Anderson films, not that you should hold that against him. He likes the movie. I saw this movie with my mother, who is not a gamer at all. In fact, her knowledge of video games doesn't extend very far beyond the early heyday of Pac-Man, Frogger, and Donkey Kong. And she also likes the Paul W.S. Anderson movies, not that you should hold that against her.
I don't. Your mom's pretty cool.
And she likes this movie. So two separate accounts of people who aren't familiar at all, who aren't really all that familiar with the games, who like this movie despite not being fans.
Oh yeah.
So allow me to take that as take your restrictive dialect and shove it so far up your ass. Fuck you very much.
While I'm thinking about it, you want to know what scene really gave me the chills in that movie? The itchy tasty scene.
Dude.
Chills.
I love that. Oh god. I love that scene.
Like, we see this crazy ass woman staring at Claire through the window. And then we hear the door open, and we. I want to say that's the son of the crazy woman.
It is.
And Claire looks under the table and says, "Do you need help?" And the kid just looks at her and says, "You need help." That's an obvious reference to the Resident Evil 2 remake, the Claire story, when she first finds Sherry.
Yeah, I love that callback. I love that callback and the Jill sandwich callback.
Even though the Jill sandwich line actually made sense.
Yes, it didn't come out as goofy and forced like when Barry dropped it in the original RE1. That's still one of my favorite lines in RE history.
You were almost a Jill sandwich. And again, that's the game. It's a good game, but it had the worst voice acting.
Oh my god. It did. That voice...
I love the game, but not the voice acting.
No, the voice acting. Dude, I think his name is Pablo Kuntz, the guy who plays Wesker in the original RE1. He has a YouTube channel now, and he and his son are doing a Let's Play of the original RE1.
Hell yeah. I gotta look that up.
Yeah! And it's a total trip. It's a surreal experience to watch if you're a fan. Yeah, I love the itchy tasty scene, and I love Birkin's transformation. It did kind of it did kind of look a little goofy at parts, but it was the way he was kind of, his arm was morphing into that amorphous blob. It kind of gave me, and I brought up in my review that John Carpenter was an influence on Roberts. Dude, the fucking Thing. That scene was giving me the Thing vibes.
It was. Well, yeah, when he is walking around talking shit, looking for Chris. For some reason, it made me think of the tentacle clawed tyrant from Extinction.
Isaacs. Yeah, the Dr. Isaacs tyrant.
Like, not like in looks, but just like how they were talking when they were obviously too far gone.
I'll admit, Extinction has its fair share of moments, and I really like the Isaacs tyrant in that movie. I like Neil McDonough morphing into the G mutant more.
Yeah, the head on that tyrant. What the head of his his final form at the end there on the train. You know what that head, monster head, made me think of?
What?
It made me think of the skull crawlers from Kong Skull Island.
I could see that. I could definitely see that. Yeah. Speaking of Birkin, the last person I had on my 90s fan cast for this movie was David Duchovny, Fox Mulder from the X-Files, as William Birkin. I don't know why. There's no real reason why. I just felt like, you know what, he's got kind of a look. He could pass for a scientist. I've never watched the X-Files, but
I have.
The only David Duchovny work I'm familiar with is he did voiceover for a video game called 13, which I'm going to play at some point. And
what console was it?
It was Xbox, PS2, GameCube, and PC.
Okay, what kind of game was it? What was the genre?
It was like a first-person shooter / stealth game. A really solid, criminally underrated comic book style video game. And if you need another reason to play it, you're a government agent with amnesia, and your commanding officer is a general played by Adam motherfucking West. I love that scene on the train.
Yeah, Leon had that shitting grin, and the rocket launcher he used looked like the infinite launcher you could unlock in the Resident Evil 2 remake.
It did.
Where it was the button on top instead of a trigger.
Yeah. My mom was like, where the hell did he get one from? I was like, it's from Umbrella. It's an Umbrella train. They've always got one stored somewhere.
You never know when you'll need it.
They've always... Isn't it always rather convenient that they have fucking anti-BOW weapons just hiding somewhere?
The shit-eating grin that Leon had on his face when Chris was like, a rocket launcher? And he was like, found it in first class.
Which, let's be real here, that is totally something he would say.
Yes, it is.
And that look on his face was like, it was like he, in his mind, he just dropped the dopest one-liner ever.
Of 1998.
Yeah, like, move over, Schwarzenegger. Forget about what killed the dinosaurs, the Ice Age. Because now I've got to fucking top that. It was nice to see Leon finally get some thunder. I mean, I wasn't complaining about the way he was portrayed. I'm fine with him kind of being, tripping over his own shoelaces because he again, we've established this. It's his first day on the job and he's a new guy.
That day happened to be on September of 98 in Raccoon City.
September 30th, 1998, the worst first day he could possibly have.
And literally the next day, the whole place blew up.
Yeah. How's that going to go over with, because they imply the only reason he still has a badge is because his father may or may not be somebody with connections. I mean, he's a Kennedy, so Ted Kennedy drove his car off a bridge and left a girl to drown. Leon shooting his partner in the ass during training is fucking peanuts.
Yeah, that was... What the fuck?
I do love somebody made a thumbnail of this image where it's like, you see Leon's face and then there's Forrest Gump sitting right next to him with a word bubble that says, "He shot me in the buttocks."
Would that be in the that Resident Evil fan group, the Ure or something?
No, it was a YouTuber that I only just now discovered, who generally does solid Resident Evil related videos. He goes by Baffled Buffoon.
Baffled Buffoon, I'll have to look him up.
Yeah, he's not a bad Resident Evil. He's not a bad channel. I just wish he would ease up on the clickbaity titles for his fucking videos, but that's just me. Do you have anything to add?
Well, am I allowed to call out that YouTuber I was commenting about earlier?
Yes.
Okay, this here's a message to YouTuber Scorpion. That's SCORE space PN. Also, this is a stupid fucking name. You literally, like, I used to love your videos, dude, but you just complain about everything now. Like, literally, like, this is literally the best Resident Evil movie we've gotten. In 20 years of there being almost 20 years of there being live action Resident Evil movies, and you still think it's one of the worst things ever. And it's like, you ungrateful little bastard. It's like, there's a reason I unsubscribed a few months ago, because, face it, you're a bitch. Alright, I'm done.
Okay. Now that he has, now that Keyson has told you to, long walk short cliff, I would say to everybody who is pissing and whining about this movie, number one, you need to learn how to how to separate the source material from the game and let the movie be a movie, and understand that adaptations are not going to be one-to-one replications. If you need further verification on that rule, just look at my favorite movie of all time, Jurassic Park, versus the novel version of Jurassic Park that the movie was adapted from. People who are shitting on this movie over its lack over its characterizations and its CGI level, its visual fidelity. Number one, understand this movie was never going to look like Avengers Endgame. I brought that up in my review, and I'm going to say it again. You know, this is a $40 million movie made by a director with a background in low-budget horror, adapting a video game franchise that has drawn direct influence from B-movies since time immemorial. Shit is not going to look like a Disney-produced superhero movie that was financed through $400 million of commie cash.
Commie cash.
Well, don't most of those movies make their money from fucking China?
Yeah, pretty much.
And now this video's banned in China. Well, good. Understand that there wasn't much characterization in the games to go off of. They may not be how you wanted those characters portrayed, but but I stand by what I said. Roberts made the movie he set out to make. He accomplished what he set out to do, whereas Paul W.S. Anderson made Buffy the Tyrant Slayer. This movie was way better. This movie takes Paul W.S. Anderson's series out to the woodshed and makes it its bitch.
Pretty much. Like I said, it's in almost 20 years that are being live-action Resident movies. This is literally the best out of the bunch.
And anybody complaining about this looking like a fan film, first off, Johannes Roberts is an open and shameless fan, so technically it is a fan film. And second, or third, I don't know which number I'm on right now. I don't really give a fuck. I said this in my review, and I'm going to say it again right here. If you think you can do better, write a screenplay, direct a movie, and show me better. Until then, you can choke on my dick until I feel a draft. And until then, so I think I just broke Keyson.
Yeah, this is why I fucking love doing videos with you.
What do you think the next one should be on? Should we actually try to go for something bigger, or should we wait until Scream?
We could probably just wait till Scream.
I'd be down for that. Well, until then, because hey, we got till January. We'll see you again on movie discussions for Scream 5. So, see you then.